No one, but survivors of Nazi concentration camps, can fully understand what life was like for a prisoner in those conditions. We can only imagine how prisoners spent their days, and how they maintained their sanity, in the face of so much oppression and cruelty. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of these camps, described the problems that prisoners of the Nazi regime struggled with. His experiences also shaped his psychological theory called logotherapy, or meaning therapy. Logotherapy explains how we must understand our personal meaning in life in order to thrive and even survive in difficult circumstances.
Hello, my name is Samantha. And in this channel, we are going to travel together to the world of books. In this part, we will review Man's Search for Meaning book. Subscribe to the channel and be with me.
Today, everyone is at least somewhat aware of the inhumane and horrific practices in concentration camps throughout Germany and Eastern Europe. Likewise, the victims of Nazi violence during the Holocaust were at least partially aware of the terrible fate that awaited them. For this reason, it is thought that their initial reaction upon entering the camps must have been fear. However, the reactions were divided into three distinct stages. The first stage began upon arrival at the camp, or even during the transfer of prisoners. The prisoners were so shocked by what was happening that they tried hard to convince themselves that everything would be okay. Most of the prisoners had heard horror stories about what was happening inside the camps, but upon being sent there, they told themselves that things would be different for them. For example, those arriving at the Auschwitz death camp were sent to the left or right as they got off the train, one group for hard labor and the other for immediate execution. However, none of them knew what these groups meant. During this first phase, the prisoners, who were not yet accustomed to the horrors of the camp, were intensely afraid of whatever happened. Faced with horrific violence, they soon lost hope and saw death as a form of liberation. After a few days, the prisoners became accustomed to their situation and focused on survival. Once the initial shock was over, the prisoners quickly became accustomed to the constant trauma and death around them, resulting in a kind of emotional numbness. Instead, all their thoughts and feelings were focused on survival. Instead of thinking about feelings like love, the prisoners talked more about necessities like food and toilets, which we usually take for granted but were severely limited in the camps. They even dreamed about these things. The feeling of numbness in the second stage was a shield that gave them the strength to endure the daily brutalities of the camp and increase their chances of survival. For example, after several people died in one camp due to a typhus outbreak, prisoners in the second phase no longer felt disgust or pity when looking at the corpses. Instead, they had the opportunity to take food, shoes, or clothing left over from the dead prisoners. Ultimate despair and reaching meaninglessness. No one except the guards knew when their stay in the camp would end. This made the prisoners feel like they had no meaning in life. Most prisoners thought their lives were already over. They were just existing in the camp. They had given up on life because there was no goal to achieve. How could the prisoners maintain their mental health and survive these traumas? It all depended on their focus. For some, imagining their loved ones and remembering the past allowed them to mentally escape the horror and cruelty of their environment. In fact, those who could find at least a little happiness in their memories were often better able to survive than others. There was no peace in the brutal reality of the camps, as they had to do hard work in the bitter cold and in thin clothing. But love could give them a sense of satisfaction. A pleasant conversation with their loved ones, even if only in their imagination, was something the camp guards could not take away from them. Even the smallest reminders were comforting, mundane things like turning on the lights in my bedroom at home. During their half-hour lunch break, prisoners would form small groups in which they would try to distract themselves from reality by singing or performing small plays. Even the prisoners had a sense of humor at times. This humor often involved imagining the future, after release, and joking about how the camp would affect their future. The author of Man's Search for Meaning witnessed many horrific scenes in the camps. During that time, he came to the conclusion over and over again that people need meaning in their lives in order to have hope for the future. In fact, prisoners who were able to maintain this meaning were stronger and more resilient than those who had lost the meaning of their lives. These observations confirmed many of his own psychotherapy theories, namely logotherapy and semantic therapy, which hold that the search for meaning is the greatest motivation in our lives. There has been a lot of research to support this theory. For example, in a study from Johns Hopkins University, students were asked what they considered to be the most important thing in their lives. The overwhelming majority, 78%, reported that finding purpose and meaning in life was most important to them. When we can't find meaning in our lives, we experience something called an existential void. People who don't live according to their values, or who feel that their lives have no meaning, experience a kind of inner emptiness. You don't necessarily have to go through a serious trauma to experience existential emptiness. For example, people may find that their lives are completely devoid of meaning after a hard week of work. The goal of meaning therapy is to help individuals find meaning and, as a result, prevent the negative consequences of a permanent existential void. Knowing the importance of finding purpose in life, the question remains, how can we find our own meaning? In fact, many people believe that in order to make the right decisions in life, we must first discover our ultimate purpose. However, meaning therapy suggests that the opposite is true. How we act and the responsibility we feel for our choices determine the meaning of our lives. For example, prisoners who were able to maintain a sense of purpose in their lives in concentration camps did so based on their choices. Deciding to seek beauty in nature or helping others in need gave them a sense of purpose, a sense that they had not failed and could hope to continue on their path. One implication of this view is that the meaning of our lives does not necessarily have to be the same. In fact, everyone has their own unique meaning of life. If you ask a chess grandmaster what the best move is, he will tell you that there is no best move. However, depending on the different situations during the game, the best move will arise. The same is true of the meaning of life. There is no universal meaning to life, and the meaning of life depends on each individual's unique set of circumstances and decisions. The goal of logotherapy and semantic therapy is to help people understand the possibility that their lives can have meaning and that everyone must discover their life's purpose through their own decisions. There is no limit to the meaning of life. For example, you may find that your new job at a recycling startup has personal meaning for you, e.g., feeling like you are part of a team that is making an impact in the world, or that it transcends personal concerns and encompasses community and social conscience, e.g., seeing other people's lives improved.